Hey everybody, this is Dan with Pain Free You. Today I have the pleasure of introducing Vanessa from Toronto. And Vanessa's got her own success story that she'd like to share with everybody here. She says it's in two parts. It was a longer journey, and she's now helping people out by providing some resources as well as doing coaching. So I believe Vanessa is going to have a lot to offer, some inspiration, some instruction, some education. And so pleased to meet you. Vanessa and I are just meeting for the first time.
Yeah, this is definitely cool because I've been watching you for so many years. I have been subscribing and listening to your messages. And actually, when I first started coaching, a lot of the first, resources I would send to my clients is like, go watch one of Dan's videos a day. Because the messages are so clear and so important and really helped uncouple the fear, right? We know that, if I were to simplify this journey, it's all about fear and a lack of safety, right? So any way that we can uncouple fear and come to safety is key. And so your resources have been vital to myself, to so many people. But I'll kind of start off. I think I'm not going to go all the way to the beginning, but we all know from our childhoods. I feel like I was born dysregulated, born into this fear. My parents even had like nicknames for me, or many of my relatives, in Greek, which was called like the fear girl, right? So I was always afraid of everything, always anxious, always scared. And I also had mind body symptoms as a child. Now I realize it, but they started back then. But I managed, right? I managed throughout school, throughout my older years. I did have, battles with kind of depression, anxiety, and eating disorders in high school, and a lot of trauma in my younger years. But I became an adult. I went to school. I graduated with a criminology degree. I entered law enforcement. I became a federal officer, and I used to basically air marshal foreign nationals, like criminals all over the world. So I was fit, strong, and living a very full life. Still had some symptoms, right? Like a migraine here and there, GI stuff, whatever it might be. But I just went about my day and I didn't really pay attention to anything. I was a big repressor, huge repressor my entire life, pretty much. And so I know that played a part in this. But essentially, in 2009, on a work trip, I was, again, there for work, to Vietnam. I contracted a deadly parasite. I didn't know it at the time, but that was like the catalyst to everything crumbling. And I'll preface to say that it's never just one thing. We know that. I know it was working shift work, drinking a lot, going out, not meeting my needs, not eating well, there's so many things, repressed trauma, but this just pushed me over the edge. Mm-hmm. And so I contracted this parasite, and things started to go wrong. So I was, in and out of the ER. I couldn't breathe. I was going to the bathroom like 12 times a day. I felt very fatigued. I was getting headaches. I would eat and eat, but I couldn't satiate myself. It was just all of these weird symptoms. And again, I'd go to the ER. They're like, nothing's wrong with you. You're fine. And this was like 9 months. So I would go to work. I would leave because I was so sick. I started developing severe vestibular stuff. So we're talking holding on to walls or crawling, right? I could not tell where I was in space and time. And again, they're telling me it's anxiety. Your wedding's coming up. So my wedding was coming up in a few months. You just moved into a new home with your fiance. It's all just anxiety. So they would prescribe me, Ativan, the benzos and anti-anxiety medication.
Sure.
And PPIs for the GERD and the digestive stuff, which I was on since I was 19. Okay, so good. A very long time almost. But so it was just this no answers, kind of hopping to doctor. And finally, about a month before my wedding, I was, I was sent to the tropical diseases unit in Toronto, and they sent my blood to the CDC in Atlanta because they're like, we don't even know what you have, but they probably know better. And so they found, I remember getting that call while I was at work, and I'm here, I'm an officer, I'm like literally amongst, all men, and I'm wearing my bulletproof vest, all strapped up, and I get this call, and she's like, you need to sit down. And I was like, okay. And she's like, promise me you won't Google this. And I said,
Oh, dear.
okay. She's like, we know what you have, and you need to get down here right away to start chemotherapy. And I said, okay. So I literally put in my leave slip. I told my manager, I'm like, I'm out. My wedding's in a month. I don't know what's going to happen. It's serious. And so I went down and we started doing chemotherapy for this deadly parasite. And I didn't Google it until years later, funny enough. And I'm so glad I didn't, because the fear from that alone would have been
Catastrophic.
yeah. So later on, I found out that the death rate was 70%, that the parasite had poked holes in my lungs, multiplied into my digestive tract, and also, they believe, also in my brain and nervous system.
Okay. So time out.
Yeah.
How rare is this? Was it purely because you went to Vietnam? Or is that more prevalent than people realize? Because I can absolutely anticipate a lot of people watching this are going to be freaking the heck out going,
Yeah.
holy shit, do I have parasites?
Right. All right. So
I really want to understand and to a degree reassure people that this is not what everybody has.
Yes, so it was extremely rare, and that's why it took so long to find it. So my partner who was with me, he didn't get it, and we ate the same things, we went to the same places. Now, looking back, they said that he could have contracted it and his body would have fought it, but because my body didn't have the capacity, I was already weakened, my immune system was low, I was not feeling well, I already had symptoms of dysregulation. That's where, looking back, we're saying, well, a normal person might have been able to completely fight this.
Right.
Right. So that's kind of where I want to kind of preface to say. And so we treated this, we treated it well, everything was gone, but I never got better. So I just kept kind of collecting diagnoses, collecting things, right? Labels. And I was like, well, I don't have this parasite anymore. And yet I have all the same symptoms still, pretty much, right? And so they're like, oh, it's post-infectious this, or post whatever virus this, post-viral that. So I got married. It was about a month after I did treatment was my wedding, and it was awful. I was in the bridal suite most of the night throwing up from the, side effects. I missed a 400 people wedding. I was devastated, and my mental health declined. And so, from that day, I just never got better. And this was 2010. And so along the way, I started to develop debilitating migraines. So I used to get maybe 1 a month, 2 a month. It got so bad that I was getting up to 26 a month, like full blown migraines. I had severe vertigo. I had to hold on to walls. There were times where I just crawled, and this lasted for 8 years. Like, this was how bad the vestibular stuff was. I had a cane if I left the house. And of course, there were times in the journey where it was louder, right? So, sometimes it was a little more manageable. And so that was a really, really big symptom. The digestive stuff never got any better. I had malabsorption, anemia, severe anxiety, depression. I developed agoraphobia, just small fiber neuropathy, POTS syndrome, dysautonomia. I was placed on so many medications. I had chronic bronchitis, chronic UTIs, chronic urticaria, MCAS, just everything and anything. I know I'm missing a bunch of things.
MCAS too?
Yep. I had MCAS, I had food sensitivities, limited to what I could eat, what I could even absorb, that malabsorption. I couldn't even retain the nutrients I was taking in. So during this time, by the grace of God, I had 2 kids. It was, I don't even know how I did it. Again, it was a miracle. I was very sick for both of my pregnancies, on bed rest, and I had a whole family to help me. So I was not their sole caregiver. It was my mom, my dad, my husband, my brother. That's who raised them.
Yeah.
And so again, during this time, I would try a billion things. I'd go to the doctor. I did acupuncture, chiropractor. I did Reiki, shamanic healing, past life regression. I did naturopathy, osteopathy, homeopathy. I tried all the medications. I did everything. And, there were times where, and maybe this was placebo effect, where things would kind of like get a little bit better, right? And I'd be like, oh, okay, there's something here. And then I would attempt to kind of go back to work, go back to life. And then I would relapse again. So it was this like cycle, right? Constant cycle. And again, the fear was so loud. And one of the first things I discovered was the DARE app as well, right? It was just this, so what, right? Treat the anxiety with a big so what, and kind of go about your day. And that was, I think, the first little introduction into the mind body stuff, but I didn't practice it. I read it and just kind of left it. And everything kind of peaked in 2017 and 18 when my body just completely gave out. And so I couldn't even sit up without losing consciousness because of the POTS. I had many falls and had multiple concussions from the POTS, the inability to get blood to my brain. My body forgot how to do everything. I had gastroparesis. I couldn't eat. Even drinking was difficult. I, had constant tachycardia, again, going up to 200. My blood pressure was so low. I remember at one time in the doctor's office when I had an episode, their blood pressure machine couldn't even read it. It was like, something over 40. He's like, I've never seen this number before, right? Like 60 something over 40. So obviously right away to the ER. And so I would be in and out of the ER, IV fluids, that sort of stuff. And it just got to a point where I was so sick where they just admitted me. And they had no idea what was wrong with me. I wasn't diagnosed with POTS at the time. I just had all of these unexplainable symptoms. And I was there for over a month and a half. And I had liver enzymes, chronic pancreatitis. My kidneys weren't functioning properly. I had, again, my heart was so erratic that it was immediately placed on beta blockers. And before this, I actually had an episode when I went to the ER for a migraine, and they treated me. And I guess because of, I don't know, maybe the sensitivity to medication, I flatlined. Oh, the medication literally stopped my heart. And so that was a near death experience through all of this. And what I will say about that is after I experienced that, I was in a deeper depression because I didn't want to live. I was like, why couldn't I have just gone? I got a taste of peace in that experience. And so you can just imagine, it was just hell on earth. I turned gray. Things weren't, functioning. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I couldn't do anything on my own. And so my father, who was in Greece at the time, we called him back like, she's done. My husband would be thinking about funeral arrangements. My kids, my daughter literally thought that I had already died because she hadn't seen me in a month. They weren't coming to the hospital. And so it was dire. It was dire. And while I was in that hospital bed, I started Googling. And I ended up coming across Sarah Jackson. I don't know if you're familiar with her. Mm-hmm. She, Sarah Jackson Coaching. And she had a lot of the same diagnoses that I had. And she was telling her story on YouTube. And then she started talking about the brain and brain retraining. And And something piqued my interest. I was like, this is snake oil. It's too good to be true. No, I'm going to forget it. And I left it. I was placed on 12 different medications during that stay. And then I was released, but on full-time care with my parents. So in my 30s, moving in with my parents with my 2 kids so that they could literally do everything for me. And that was like the lowest point. I just kept praying. I didn't even have faith back then, but I was just like, God, take me. If you're there, just take me. This is not living.
Right.
And my parents were very faithful. They're Greek Orthodox. And I always kind of share this story because this is where it all changed for me, is they begged me to come to church one day with them to just have a prayer read over me in an empty church. And they literally physically carried me there. I agreed. They placed me on this altar, and the priest, again, had never met him before. I wasn't a churchgoer. He started to read this prayer, and like my mom's crying, my dad's crying, he's getting emotional, and I started to just cry, and it was almost like a surrender in that moment. Like, I'm done. I don't know what else to do. And something happened in that moment, and I always say that that was when I grabbed my first hope rope. And I can't even explain it. It was just something was like, hold on. And so I did. And so a part of me at that point was like, well, maybe there's something, maybe God's there. I don't know. But I'll pray to him like, hey, clearly I'm still alive for some reason. Show me what to do to heal. And within like days, the DNRS program popped in my feed, and I had never seen it before. And so I started to read all these testimonials and, people with a lot of the same things that I had. And I took a leap of faith, and I bought it, and I started, and I learned that it wasn't my body at all. It was my brain. And I also learned that my brain can change. And so this was like hope, right? So I, just making that connection, just saying like, oh, I'm not broken, it's my brain. Oh, I'm stuck in a literal survival state. That's why I'm feeling all of this. I can turn it off. I can literally turn that switch off. And so that's when my journey of retraining started. And I started to do, the brain retraining rounds and, talk to my survival brain, messages of safety, all of that. And, that was like a good year of pretty strict like retraining. A lot of my almost like the majority of my symptoms either went away or quieted. And I got life back. I started moving. And then one of my symptoms got worse. And the migraine was just relentless. And I was like, how is this possible? And that's when I found TMS. That's when I discovered that the DNRS was making me repress all my emotion. And my brain was saying, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And so that was happening. I kept redirecting grief. I redirected anger. I redirected all of these emotions that were natural and valid. And then they kept surfacing in this debilitating migraine. And so I discovered the Curable app. I read Dr. John Sarno's books. And I started to, really start to understand TMS, right? And how when we can repress emotions, our body will talk for us. We'll express it in a different way. And so then I started to build safety with emotion. And, that kind of branched off into belief work as well. Because the belief work was key. It was like, what is the story? Like I had so many stories that were attached to illness, and those stories were informing all of my decisions and all of my experiences, right? So even if, I was walking around in my day and just being mindful of my thoughts, it was, the story of, well, you're not going to heal. Well, they did it, but you can't,
Right.
So it was like, so I had one foot in the healing world of like, I can do this. And the other foot was like, no, you can't. And so being mindful of those beliefs and working with them as well and changing the story, discovering that I had the power to change the story was life-changing. And so, yeah, and I found you along the way and your amazing messages of safety, of hope, of just the simplicity of it. And that's really how I came to this place of healing, right? And I obviously did do some somatic work as well, just kind of incorporating little things along the way. But I wasn't one of those like 6 month people. I wasn't one of those like overnighters. I felt I needed to pick things up along the way that resonated with me.
Mhm.
And rigidity of certain programs made me worse. That pressure, overwhelm, and the sense of failure, because I was an overachiever. I was a people pleaser. If I didn't do full hour of this round day, you failed. You're not going to heal. Like that
So,
was my
so
internal
common.
time. Yeah, and so I, branched off from that and was like, okay, I'm going to keep it simply to how can I support myself? How can I send a message of safety? Like that simple. And I found the ways that resonated. And it was never from a place of forcing. I'm like, okay, like this feels right. I'm gonna do it because I know it's good for me. Right. Because I know it's supportive. Because I know a part of me is listening. Even though I might not feel a shift in that moment, my brain's listening. And it's
Mm.
only a matter of time till it jumps on board. So that was kind of like my mentality, right? Is doing my best and showing up every day the best that I can. And yeah, and so I got to a place where I was, fully recovered. I went, back to work, and then COVID hit and the world shut down, and I was like I'm just ready to live. Like what? How? And that was, yeah, that was, the kind of part of my second storm, as you would call it. So, almost at the end of COVID, I moved into a new house. We had our dream home. I was, doing this work, working with clients, absolutely loving it, feeling confident and capable, and all those good things. And I had this like naiveness in me, like so naive that I'm like, nothing bad's ever going to happen again. This is the end. We're good. Life is good. And then shit happened. And it was, I call it the worst of any storm I've had.
Right.
So a few years ago, my family and I contracted COVID. The first time we got it, and it was the Delta variant, and which was supposed to be one of the most horrific ones. And so my parents got it, me and my kids got it, and within days, my dad was in the ICU on a ventilator, and I developed pericarditis, double COVID pneumonia. I was in really bad shape, in and out of the hospital for treatment, and he died within, under 2 weeks. And we never got to see him or say goodbye or do any of that. And that alone was enough to put my body into survival again.
Yeah.
But going with having the virus at the time as well, which I think my body would have done a better job fighting the virus had I not been going through the trauma of my dad being there. And yeah, and I was diagnosed with, I had just started my journey of grief, and I was diagnosed with long COVID. So that was something new. But a part of me knew, and I was like, okay, the grief is different. This is definitely a new experience that I can't brain retrain away because it's real, it's valid. I'm not
You're
going to
supposed
say,
to feel it. Yeah.
yeah. And so I was like, but I know what long COVID is. And so I was like, you can keep your label. I'm not taking it. It's not mine. I know what this is. This is my survival brain doing what it does best. And I also know how to heal this. And so I started to implement the exact same resources that I used in the past to signal safety. And I was, I incrementally trained, I sent messages of safety, I rewired, and I healed from long COVID.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah,
I just want to be clear that my perception, my opinion, this is not science, this is not medical, this is not fact. my opinion is the vast majority of long COVID is mind body, TMS, perceived danger symptoms. Your brain going into survival mode. And when the brain is terrified, things can happen. And I get a lot of people saying, but I wasn't terrified. I wasn't scared of it. And I still got all these symptoms. And I try to delineate between the brain and its autonomic nervous system subconscious response versus consciously thinking, oh no, I have COVID, I'm really afraid.
Exactly.
It's not a conscious, I did this to myself. Because a lot of people say, Dan, I wasn't afraid of this, and this, but I got symptoms anyway. So,
Yeah.
the brain's going to protect us without our permission or knowledge. And the benefit that you had was been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I'm not falling for it again. And you went right back to the work that got you through the first, set of symptoms.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I would have to agree with you, because I mean, even from my own experience and just working with so many in this community who are diagnosed with long COVID, I'm with you 100%. Like the majority, again, we can't say 100% of them, but we see it so clearly.
Yeah.
Like it's so evident, especially with people with long COVID who suddenly develop, anxiety after, right? Or intrusive thoughts, or again, an inability to exercise, post-exhaustion malaise, all of these things, which it's like, yeah, but we also experience that with this, right? So my point being is like, whether it's a parasite or a virus or whatever it might be that tips you over the edge, at the core of it still is this inability to access safety and this
Right.
survival response. So it could be so many different things, but the recipe is, pretty much the same. It's like, how do we find safety, turn off this internal alarm?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So one thing I just wanted to jump in with, because you made a good point, whether it's a parasitic, viral, or something else, the parasite eventually was found, treated, taken care of. You still had years of symptoms after.
Yeah.
Same thing with the viral. You recovered from COVID, but yet your brain was still in the I'm in trouble state, and it launched into all of these other symptoms. So I don't want people to get terrified of parasites or COVID. You recovered from both in a reasonably short period of time, but I'll say the trickle down.
Yes. Yeah.
Based on the brain, its hypersensitivity, its hyperprotection, the survival mode, the dysregulation that happens in all of the various systems. And your story is fairly similar to Angie in that things just weren't working, and it got to that state. So I'm being cautious here on purpose, because I want people to go running to the CDC and say, I've got parasites.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying they don't. I'm just saying that I don't want them to leap to that level of terror. And I don't know, towards the end, we can touch on that and like, what are your general thoughts about that? Because I think a lot of people have parasites, but they don't have the ones you did.
Exactly.
And many people, even in the US, live with them through their whole lives.
Exactly. And that's my point, right? So I actually, after researching it, I discovered that people local to that area live with it, right? And so just like with Lyme disease, people can have it, right, within them, yet have no symptoms, right? And so they won't know unless they get tested. What's the point of getting tested? You don't. So was it, and this is what I keep going back to, was it necessarily, okay, yes, the parasite, whether it was a parasite or a virus, did that push my nervous system over the edge, right? Yes, 100%. If I, let's say, was in a better state, had more resources, wasn't treating my body like crap throughout that entire time, would I have been able to just fight it off naturally?
More resilient, yeah.
Yeah, and so that's what I realize now, right? And that helps uncouple the fear.
Yeah, but that's also scary to people because they're going, I've been dysregulated for years, so I'm more susceptible to this stuff,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yes, I hear it both
our
ways. Yeah, because
audience,
you're always looking for it. You're looking for it. If you're looking for it and you don't see it, your brain will create it.
yeah,
And that's what I always find, right? Is what is your expectation?
hmm,
If you're searching for something to be wrong, you're going to find something.
yeah.
And you're going to say it's wrong, whether it's a lab or
Well,
a scan or something,
that's the
right?
nocebo effect. And it's
Exactly.
also reticular activating system. If you believe you're
Yeah.
sick,
Yes.
brain's going to look for evidence
Exactly.
everywhere to prove your belief correct. And if you think you're sick, your brain's going to go, yep, there, proof, proof, proof. And so we have to shift our beliefs, and that comes from a research and understanding of how this system works, and then in making a decision that goes, okay, I'm really not broken, or even if all the symptoms indicate that I'm broken, I will get better.
Yeah.
Teach the brain, this computer system, that I'm actually capable of getting through this.
Yes. Yeah. And
People will
that's the
go,
story,
there,
right?
I don't feel safe. That's not accessible to me. Fine. Because people go, I can't say I'm safe. I'm like, that's fine. Say this, I will be safe. I
Yeah.
will get through this. Hope rope, right? I like that term.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah. No, even like you kind of just touching on that too is I'm cultivating safety. I'm working
I
on
like
it.
that.
Right? I'm in the process of it. And so that's where, again, for myself, the belief work, and I do belief work and mindset work with all of my clients because I know how pivotal that is the story. What is the story that's informing your experience? And so when I say, like you said, is I don't feel safe right now, right? Well, can we say that we are in the process of connecting to safety? Or I'm cultivating safety, right? All of these things that bring an element of power and choice
Yeah.
when we feel we have none. And then when it comes to our bodies too, is my building up this belief that my body knows what to do.
Yeah. I've been
There's a
harping on that
wisdom.
a lot.
Yeah, there's such a beautiful wisdom. We are literally created to heal. Healing is a literal promise in the body, right? And so when you think of it that way, it's like, well, if my body can heal, then why isn't it? Well, sometimes the body needs support. And what does that support look like, right? It might be supporting it with these mind body tools, right? And sometimes we can go outside. Like I said, I had to go to the doctor and get, a medication for something, but I didn't see that. Now looking back, those are never the fix. They're never the cure. They are supports. They are extras, right? At the core of it, this work, you cultivating safety within yourself, not depending on everyone outside of yourself to heal you or fix you, that is where healing happens, right? So everything else is gravy. And I always say that. If you are at a place like I will not say, don't try a supplement or don't do this or don't do that. I will say is, well, what is the story you're attaching to that supplement? Do you feel that that supplement is going to fix you and you're putting all your eggs in that basket and your expectation, then
Yeah.
you're going to be disappointed
Yeah.
and you're going to create more fear, right? So
Because
it's like,
people,
yeah,
when they look to an external thing to fix them, that subconsciously lets them off the hook for doing the important stuff, which
yes,
is creating and cultivating that safety. It's like,
yes,
if I can take this, I'll get better.
yes,
No responsibility for being the active director of the recovery.
yeah, exactly.
So that's why so many people are just so compelled to seek out, well, maybe that'll help, or maybe that'll help. And they continue to go back to doctors and medicines and
Yeah.
treatments and all that stuff. And I'm going, you're hanging on to the wrong hope.
Yes.
You're expecting something external to fix you. This is an inside job. So,
Yeah. So instead of holding on to the hope rope, you're holding on to loop and you're constantly going round and round, right? That revolving door. And I think that I see a lot of people, and hey, I was there for years too,
sure.
right? Like one foot here, one foot in this door and one foot in the other. And it's understandable. But when you come to that place when you know that this is this is the key. You have the keys to the kingdom within you. Like this is the way to go. It's a sense of freedom, right? It's not necessarily now doing all of these things from a place of fear. It's making informed decisions from a place of regulation and safety, saying like, maybe going for a massage might even make me relax. That's supportive. It's not the thing that's going to heal me.
Yeah.
But hey, it feels good. So
I always say to people, they're like, well, our massage is allowed. I said, well, if you want a massage, go get a massage. But whatever you do, don't have them talk about your tight muscles here and how they're going to work these knots out. Just walk in and say, I don't want to hear about my body. I don't want you to focus on any one part. Pamper me.
Yes. That's how I like my massages too, right?
Right. I don't want to hear about my tight shoulder muscles, because then I'm going to walk away for 3 weeks thinking about my tight shoulder muscles and thinking I've got to do something to fix my tight shoulder muscles.
Yeah.
Pamper me. Don't say a word.
I love that. Yeah. And so I'm totally with you. And then I'll comment one last thing on this topic is what I see a lot in for those of us who we put so much power in those around us or the things external to us is that it becomes a scapegoat and this almost like lessens the pressure on you. So those of us who are so afraid to fail, right? If that supplement doesn't work, I haven't failed, the supplement failed. If that practitioner didn't do their thing, it's not on me, it's on them. And there's such a fear of trying this work and not succeeding that people don't try. So that's where I see people doing, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I did 3 rounds today, but I'm still researching everything on Google because there's something wrong and I have to find it. And this doctor knows, and I found this other doctor, and I'm like, are you listening to yourself? How can you heal if you're holding so tightly onto that? You make no room for anything else. Safety doesn't even have the opportunity to cultivate when you're in that state, right? So then you're pendulating and oscillating between these two. So anyhow, I could talk about that forever.
There's an interesting dialogue going on right now today because I just published a video about pressure to heal will delay your recovery. Yeah. Because pressure to heal is like, well, I got to get better by next Thursday or this and that. And it's an interesting dialogue going on in the comments about that.
But I
pressure equals danger. Even Angie said that in our success story with her. She said, the pressure to heal, it's a signal of danger.
Yeah, of course, because it's also a sense of urgency, right? And so when you're in that urgent response, you're in survival. It's just, solidifying that survival response. I'm a very compassionate approach for the way that I do things. I'm always about like, you gotta like love yourself through this. All the pushing, the perfectionism, like I, again, have a law enforcement background. I was militant in my work with this work, but that way, that method of doing things got me sick. Why would I apply the same method of overachieving, perfectionism, militant, all of that to the healing work? It's literally doing the same thing, right? It's causing stress. And so less of that, again, it's compassion, it's showing up. And I always say this to my clients, show up every day in some way. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Let go of expectations and pressure of expectations of how it should look. And please don't compare yourself to anyone else. There are so many pathways to safety, so many roads to healing, right? There isn't just one way to do that. And we've seen that. But at the core of it, it really is about returning to safety. And if you're beating yourself up through it, you're not safe. No matter what you do, no matter how many rounds you're doing, if you're like, I failed, I didn't do enough, I'm never going to heal because I didn't do that, then what is that? How is that making you feel? Right?
Self-judgment, self-criticism, it feels like an attack. Nothing about an attack is safe.
Exactly. Yeah. Perfect. So where did we leave off? I don't even remember. So I mean, that was my journey. And I also kind of wanted to touch on grief because I have a lot of people in the brain retraining community who come from this place of, again, like we said, redirecting emotion, kind of elevate your emotional state all day long, only focus on the, the positive.
Don't let a negative thought stick around without fixing it, which basically says repress, repress, repress.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're
No
always
allowance for feeling anything negative.
right. Yeah. And so I that is kind of where I was at with my DNRS journey, right? Just really pushing everything away. And I noticed that that there's a lot of grief in this community. Okay. So grief over the time we lost, maybe the dreams and hopes we lost, the marriages that have kind of, crumbled, the relationships that we've lost.
Grief over the future we think we deserve and don't
Yeah.
expect to ever get.
Yeah, exactly. And so I see it so loud and clear in this community, and yet, like, from my experience, like, no one's talking about it, right? We're told to redirect. And I actually had a few brain retrainers tell me that in their brain retraining group, they were told to redirect grief, to bring something positive, to do it positive, and I'm like, whoa, that's like gaslighting yourself on 1,000 levels. And so then, again, we know about symptom imperative, right? Like maybe this symptom gets better, but this one gets louder, and we're still repressing all of this emotion. And so from what I've learned just from my journey and from now kind of working with so many in this community is that the grieving is a part of the healing, right? And so I realize that as we're healing and doing this work, let the grief surface. It's surfacing to heal. When we can grieve what we lost, only then can we accept where we are at now, see the resources available to us now, and make room for what can be, for what can grow from that. And so I'm seeing healing happening even as, people are in this survival response, and maybe some people don't have as much capacity for emotion, but guess what? Grief, emotion doesn't need all of your attention. It needs dedicated time and attention. So can we take and pause and give it 5 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
And outside of that, do your best to cultivate safety and slowly build that, right? But I'm seeing that like it's such a key piece that a lot of people are not addressing.
Sure.
And I've seen how it can be such a beautiful part of this process of healing and how valid it is. So yeah, that's kind of one thing I've been kind of on a mission to teach about how the grief is intertwined with all of this, and that we all have it, in some form or another, and that we don't need to be afraid of it. We need to learn to befriend it, sit with it. It becomes integrated, it becomes a part of us, and it helps us expand. It helps us grow. When you can sit with grief, man, you can do anything. Right? So that's kind of like my little.
No, that's great. I mean, I talk about grief in a few videos. And my main message is grief is real. Grief needs to be felt. We need to experience it. If we truly cared for the person or the pet or whatever, that grief will never go away. Anybody saying, get over it, it's been 6 weeks, 6 months, 6 years, get over it, is misunderstanding it. They're making you feel bad about the fact that this person or animal meant a lot to you. And I say we need to feel it. We need to let those waves hit us. But at the same time, we can allow it and yet soften it. And I switched to gratitude that, okay, if I'm missing this person so badly, how grateful am I that this person meant so much to me that I'm grieving this hard?
Yeah.
So it's a blessing and a curse at the same time. I lost somebody, but holy cow, was I lucky, like in your case, to have a father like you did.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the
Cared for you
complexity.
the way he did and everything else. And so I don't know if, from your experience with grief, if that softening it with gratitude comes across as dismissing it. I don't think it does. I
Yeah.
think it honors it and still honors that loss.
Yeah. So I think grief is what I love so much about grief is how complex and expansive it is.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning we can hold both grief and gratitude at the same time. We can hold, loss and joy at the same time. It doesn't just have to be one. In fact, grief encompasses so many experiences, and it's not just the negative ones that people say, right? The anger, the fear, the shame, the guilt. It's also gratitude, right? It's also a sense of joy and connection. And that's not just grieving the loss of a loved one too, but just for this journey too, right? We can grieve that we had to go through this, that I spent over a decade of my life in debilitating chronic illness. But I can also hold gratitude for the fact that I know what I know now, that my kids now, like I just taught a whole workshop on how to help your kids access safety. Okay. And so I'm like, this, I would have never known this, right? Like my children's nervous systems now are going to be set up because of me, because of what I went through. I can teach them this now. And so, yeah, I mean, it's not gaslighting. I mean, for myself, I love using different kind of ways to process grief, many of which are somatic and involve softening, but sitting with it first, like, can I notice? Where is it? Can I place my hand on there? Can I love it? Can I allow it? Can I accept it? Can I see it for what it is without trying to fix it or change it? And when we do that, it automatically starts to soften.
But that also works for any other emotion.
Yes.
Not just
yes.
sadness,
No, it's
anger, rage,
Yep.
shame, guilt. Allow is the key phrase as far as emotions go.
Yes. Yeah.
Allow it so that it can pass. And then the other thing I tag on is, and then don't get stuck in story mode, which is ruminating on why you're upset in the first place.
Exactly.
Because the rumination will keep on firing up the emotion over and over and over again. They're going, well, I don't want to let myself get sad because if I do, I'll never stop.
Yes, that's a big fear in this community.
It will pass if you allow it and stop ruminating on all the 14 different reasons you are sad.
Yeah. Yes. So I call that thinking brain override, right? When you're in thinking brain override and overthinking and trying to analyze the emotion, you're not in the emotion, right? Overthinking is underfeeling. So how can I come here now in this moment and sit with what is without trying to fix it or change it, because there's nothing wrong with it, right? So it's a beautiful experience when you can start to learn how to do this, and it's such an empowering thing as well. And that's why I get so passionate about it, because I'm like, I love talking about, and for myself, grief is this umbrella that encompasses all of that. I mean, it can jealousy, rage, overwhelm, fear. I mean, all of that is intertwined with that. And it's beautiful to kind of see how they move together and how we can move with them. And that's the key for myself. It's like, I can move with fear. I can move with anxiety. I can move with anger. I can take it with me. It's a part of me. And when it starts to feel safe, it won't be as loud. Right. So, yeah, that's kind of my take on emotions and grief.
Yeah. So I just want to, for the audience benefit, this is the second success story in a row where symptoms have been astronomical, near death's door, shut down, all of that. And I really want people to listen to this success story and the one previous with Angie from an inspiration standpoint, and not flip it to fear, like, oh my God, is that going to happen to me?
Yeah.
Right? Because what we're proving with you, with Angie, with Phil, who overcame rheumatoid arthritis, and the many dozens of other success stories, is when you kind of grab onto this concept that I'm not broken, and that even if I don't have safety now, I will. And I will get better. If you don't believe there's no way I can get better, you got to grab onto that hope and say, look at all these successes, not just me, but thousands around the internet. This stuff is possible. And I like to say it's not just possible to get better. It's when you grasp onto these concepts and implement consistently and create that safety, it's not just possible to get better, it's probable that you will.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I agree. I actually did a reel today about that specifically because in my chats, I had the same question this morning. How do I believe? Well, I'm not believing. Oh, no, I don't believe 100%. That means I'm not going to heal, right? All
Oh,
of that. And
I
I said,
addressed
well,
that one.
yeah. And I obviously always tell them, is none of us really start off, at least in my opinion, 100% believing.
Nobody does.
The
Nobody gets
belief
there.
is the belief is cultivated. We grow it. And part of the way we grow that is by borrowing belief from others. And so that's why
Say that
stories like
word.
yours, right? Yeah, it's these recovery stories. It's seeing those who have gone before you and can look back and say, yeah, you're going to be okay. And that plants a seed of what if? What if that applies to me too? What if this works?
It
What
does.
if I can heal? What if I am healing? Right. And that's just such a powerful shift, right? Don't focus on the fact that you're not believing 100% yet. You've made a choice to be open to belief. You've made a choice to borrow it until you can hold it yourself.
Yeah.
And things are changing, things are happening. And yeah, it's beautiful to see. And I know you talk about all this all the time. So our messages definitely align, which I
Right.
love. Yeah.
Yeah, I say believe enough to put this stuff into play. And as
Yes.
you move forward and take action and observe your experiences, your belief will grow,
Yep.
right? And so um, people say, I don't have 100%, so I'm not even going to start. I'm saying,
Yeah.
big mistake. Believe enough to begin.
Yes.
Steps. First time a baby lets go of their parents' hands and takes that first step, they don't know if they're going to fall on their butt or not. Um, like with anything, learning
Yeah.
anything in life, you don't need 100% belief. You just need to start.
Yeah. And no one has ever regretted starting. I've met many who've regretted not starting soon enough
Starting
or
at
just
all.
or starting at all. But I've never met anyone in this community that regrets starting this work.
How about the
And
person who is so fearful that it won't work that they don't even begin?
I know many of them, and I know you do too.
My answer to that is, okay, I know if you try this and it doesn't work, this is your last hope. And that's terrifying that this is my last hope. So I'm afraid to start because if it doesn't work, I'm in trouble. And my answer is not starting is going to guarantee it doesn't work. So
Yeah.
you got to move forward. You got to have
Yeah.
some element of trust that if others can do it, you can too. They're human beings. You're a human being. They're capable. But I'm so anxious. I've never felt safe in my life. You said I've been activated my whole life.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it. A lot of people who get better were in the same pit of despair that you might be right now.
Yeah.
So if they can do it, you can do it. You got to
Yeah.
start somewhere. And so I love the message of hope. I am a little cautious about the parasites and deadly and all this and, the COVID and how extreme your symptoms got. I know there will be some people triggered, which is why I'm so cautious in reassuring people.
Yes. Yeah.
And,
Yeah. And like I said, just to reaffirm that too is I had the exact same symptoms after that parasite.
mhm.
So that just goes to show, right? Like, where were the symptoms really fully from that? I don't know. I can't say. I will say again, like I said, there's
It was a
people
trigger.
living with that. Yeah, it was the cherry on top, right? It was the last straw. It was what broke the camel's back. And
Yeah. It was a
that's
little
how
bit
it
of water poured into the bucket that overflowed it.
overflowed.
But up
Yeah,
until that point, you had
exactly.
varying degrees of fullness of that
Dysregulation.
bucket.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I will also add that and I shared this today on my Instagram, is there's nothing so special about me that I healed, and there's nothing so special about you that you can't.
Right.
So there's nothing so
Special
unique.
kind of broken is what people think that.
Yeah, you're not. I mean, I had all of those beliefs too. I held those firm for a long time. And I say the majority of people in this community have those same beliefs. And yet if you keep showing up, like it's going to take as long as it takes, but you have to keep showing up. And that is a choice. That's why I always say healing is a choice,
Mhm.
right? We can either choose to stay exactly where we are, doing absolutely nothing, right? Searching outside of ourselves for everything and anyone. Or we can choose to start to connect to safety, to start doing, what if you did one thing today, like left all of those fear groups, all of those groups, let them go, let go of the labels. And then what if you did another thing? Take out all sickness talk and labels out of your house. Don't ever say pain or whatever, rename it, right? I did that with my entire family. We said every symptom is going to be a fruit now, right? So migraines was melons. I had whatever, stomach pain, raspberries, anxiety was kiwis. It became fruit, and a hard day was a fruit salad. So I was able to communicate to my family and my friends, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
But I don't have the fear, the charge that word of POTS, migraine has anymore. No, and like those words stuck till today, and this has been years later.
Yeah.
If we have my mom has a headache, she's like, melon today. She'll just text me a melon. So it's so interesting how the little changes. So if you're listening today, making these small changes, maybe change the way you speak, right? Yeah, leave those groups, please. Leave those groups. They are
Bad
not
neighborhoods.
serving. Yeah, and the other one is to always, I love this one, is always speak what you want, not what you don't want. And so what is your expectation if someone asks you, how are you feeling today? My husband comes home from work and he's like, well, how are you? And I'm like, oh, horrible, oh, this hurts, that hurts, this. And so I switched that to, I could feel more at peace or more comfortable, and I'm working on it, right? I could feel more safe, and I'm getting there. I could feel more at ease. So
I feel awful.
Exactly, because then we're giving that charge and giving it power, right? And so these simple changes, if that's all you do today, and for the rest of the week, just start somewhere. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Like, start somewhere, and these things will add up. They will change your life. This is where I started.
Yeah.
And and it all adds up. So
baby steps.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I am honored, impressed. I see your strength to come through all of that, to see the gift that it was. In hindsight, during it, no way. If somebody told you this was a gift while you were in the hospital for 6 weeks, no way. You got to be kidding me. You'd kick them out. But so many of the people who are coaching, and even the doctors who are in the mind-body space, they've got their own journeys, and they wouldn't be doing this if they didn't experience it. So do I look back at my 13 years with some poor me and that sucked and I missed out on a lot of things? Sure. It's a gift, because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if that didn't happen. And you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. I can hear it in your voice, the passion, the conviction, the confidence that, holy crap, you can do this. It's not fake. This is not a show you're putting on. This is like, I lived it.
Yeah.
And if I can do this, you can do it. And so I just, I see your conviction and strength and passion to help people. So I love that. So if you would, why don't you tell people where they can find you if they'd like to follow you or connect with you?
Yeah, for sure. You can follow me on Instagram at Your Grateful Guide. I'm also on YouTube as Your Grateful Guide, and I'll give Dan some of the links as well. My website is yourgratefulguide.com, and I also have a Haven membership in there as well. And we do some live classes every month, and a lot of the focus is on, again, rewiring and regulating, but also grief and emotional processing. So building safety with emotion, which is a big passion of mine. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. Up until recently, meaning Angie's success story, I've never really considered myself like a nervous system coach. My general statement is your brain and nervous system is working perfectly. It's just operating on misinformation and fear.
Right.
And your system's working. it's just got bad data going into this computer and you're getting a really lousy output.
Right.
Um, but I'm starting to realize through conversations with you, through Angie, even Luann, that without calling it nervous system regulation, training, rewiring the brain, I don't call it any of that because I don't want people to view brain rewiring. I got a wiring problem, or I've got a nervous system that's out of whack, or the vagal nerve and the this and that and the limbic. I'm broken in 16 ways, which is why I don't label things as any of that. But at the end of the day, um, we're fixing our brain and nervous system.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
don't even like that I just use that word. We are teaching the brain and nervous system something new by cultivating that safety. And I really like that word cultivating because people say all the time, but I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe. How can I be safe? I got this, and this going on. And I'm going to borrow that word from you and say, you may not feel it now, but you can cultivate it with a commitment and an awareness and a decision to build on it. So I
Yeah.
love that. So thank you. And I like your hope rope thing too.
Hope Ropes, yeah. Actually, I have a podcast called Hope Ropes. It's very new. I just started it, and the same. It's just I really just want to hand out Hope Ropes to the
Awesome.
people who are listening in this community. So yeah, I mean, it's such a pleasure and honor. Like I said before, I was starstruck because I've been watching you for years
Please.
and all of these amazing recovery stories. And I just know how much your messages have helped not only myself, but my clients and people in the community. So yeah, I love what you're doing. And I think the community is so lucky to have you. Again, there's that you had to go through what you went through. It sucks, but man, look what came out of it, right? All things work together for good. That's what I believe.
I literally have no idea what I'd be doing with my life if I weren't doing this. Seriously. I mean, I have a secondary business that I run with my son that I sell air cleaners for tobacco smoke, cigar
Wow.
shops, and the big air cleaners. But
Yeah.
boy, would my life be boring if that was what I was doing for a living. So I am blessed to have gone through what I went through and that I can, put out messages that are truly helping people. I'm honored that I was part of your success because watching, people like Angie and you and how significant the symptoms were and coming through it and saying, you're part of it, Dan. I couldn't be more touched by being able to help people at that level. Um, and it's really why I do what I do. So
Yeah. Well, you're really good at it. So I hope you never stop.
practice. You
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
do
I
5.5 years of daily videos, you kind of get
yeah.
better at it. And I learn from everybody who comments and the coaching clients and everything else. So you keep at it. I mean,
Yes.
you're already good at explaining what you do and how to teach it and all that kind of stuff. So
Thank you. Thank you.
you are somebody I would have no problem saying, look her up, follow her, check her out. YouTube,
Awesome.
Instagram, Your Grateful Guide. Just search that on YouTube or Instagram. You'll find it. Or just type it in at Your Grateful Guide on Instagram and yourgratefulguide.com. And for anybody watching, we appreciate Vanessa for sharing the story. We're sorry if some of this scary stuff triggered you.
I should have put a warning, rated
Yeah,
R.
we'll do trigger warning on the description.
All right.
But hearing stories like this can be triggering. But honestly, hearing stories like this helps everybody watching build resilience. Because if hearing your story is going to send somebody off in the deep end, they're being triggered by their own experience. And if
Mhm.
you want to get less triggered by your own experience, hearing somebody else go through some really tough stuff and get better will build your own resilience for your own experience. And I say that in my group coaching all the time. People are like, oh, it was too intense. I can't deal with it. I'm out. And they'll literally show up to one call and then be, oh, I got triggered. Like you're missing out on building resilience by participating in these discussions and learning to be less triggered.
Yeah.
Because if you
I
always
agree.
run away from triggers and fear and even, oh my goodness, I'm too empathic, excuse me, and I can't hear other people's stories, you're teaching your brain to stay afraid. And so that's not how we build resilience.
No.
Somebody in my coaching program said, yeah, it can be tough to watch some people struggle once in a while, but the positives far outweighed the triggers once in a while. And I don't want to say this to scare people away from the group, like, oh boy, Dan's talking about triggers. It can happen. You can't be in a chronic pain recovery group or symptom recovery group without seeing some people struggle. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, it's human too, right? Like we can't chop out or cut out, edit out all the bad and only focus on the good, because then we're missing out on so much, right? Yeah. We know that there's purpose to both, right? And I think, like you said, is the triggers are our teachers, and they're also opportunities to expand through it, right?
Our capability, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's all I've got for you, Vanessa. Okay. It's a real pleasure to meet you. We haven't spoken.
Yeah, this was fun.
Pleasure to hear all about your story. Thank you for sharing it. You're very articulate, and you're throwing out a whole bunch of hope ropes for people to grab onto.
Yes.
Which is wonderful. And I love that phrase. So I'm not going to do a video on hope ropes, but I like it though. Don't want to steal that from you. No, it's okay.
Oh, no worries.
I appreciate you so much. If there's ever anything I can do for you, let me know. Follow her on Instagram and YouTube, and her website, Your Grateful Guide, or gratefulguide.com. So, all right. Unless you got anything else, we'll wrap this one up.
Oh, no. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Absolutely. Take care. See you. Bye.